Welcome to the NRT Now podcast, giving you the latest in Christian music news, topics, and artist interviews directly from the largest Christian music site online, newreleasetoday.com. Now, here's your host, Jake.
Hey y'all, welcome to episode 31. Hey, we just hope that you are doing well through everything here, and we just appreciate that you're spending some time with us here. This is socially distanced approved time together. For most of us, we are 6 feet apart. I know I'm even 6 feet apart from my wife right now, so we just appreciate that you're spending some time with us. Real quick, before we get too far into the episode, I just want to challenge you to pray with me, just for our country, just for our world, just everything that's going on. As we start opening up, there's a mix of fear, of just division. There's a whole bunch of junk going on around with this whole thing and everything that's going on with COVID. So I just challenge you to pray with me just for everything going on, that if there's anybody that you know that needs the peace and the hope of Jesus, to pray for them. Share some of your favorite Christian music with them. This is a point in time where we really need that peace and hope and just love of God to wash over us. So I challenge you to do that with me. I need to get better about that myself as well, instead of worrying about what's going on. I'm directing this challenge at myself as well. So it would be awesome if you join me in doing so. So our guest for this episode is Attaboy, and this is wrapping up our Together We Love from the We Love Awards show podcast episode series here. And my boy Legend was here with me in this episode, or when we're recording this. So our guest for this episode is the group Attaboy, and this is wrapping up our Together We Love podcast episode series, from the We Love Awards show back in February, which I say it every time. It seems like an eternity now. But in this conversation, my boy Legend, you've seen him on our 5 minutes promo. If you went to Winter Jam, you saw the promo there live. You can see it on our YouTube channel. We pushed it out a few times. Really awesome. If you haven't seen that, go check that out. But yeah, Legend was there hanging out with us. And after this episode, he just straight up peaced out, said, I'm out. I think he was done with me by that point, but what he said afterwards was he had heard what he needed to hear for the day, and he just had the opportunity to just absorb and process that. Through the busyness of the rest of the day, it didn't really click with me on that one. I mean, I gave him grief about it a couple of times through the show. I mean, what are friends for, right? But it wasn't until I was just remembering this episode as I was going through this conversation here. It reminded me of a conversation with Tasha Layton, way back. And she was talking about being in the presence of God and being there until you got what you needed. And I'm paraphrasing, but sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 5 hours, but just staying in the presence until you've got what you needed. And it took over 2 months for that to click for me. I mean, it was cool to see just the personification of that. I saw it play out live in front of me. Legend got the word that he needed for the day and was able to process that and was able to run forward with that. And it was just so cool to see that happen. And just to see the relationships that were formed throughout that afternoon, and just them being able to connect all throughout the afternoon, through the evening, before or after the show. We'll hear a little bit in the episode, but Attaboy really focuses on schools and working in the mission field of our schools, which at this point, I don't know if anybody remembers what school is. Yikes. But they're talking about just some of the isolation and the loneliness that happens within the school that they work with, or that they hear the stories of now more than ever, with all of us having to be distanced and not being able to have that interaction at schools. We're seeing that amplified. And someone that's 2 degrees separated, if you go by the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon principle, wound up committing suicide as kind of a result of this isolation and not being able to be around friends, and just that hopelessness and just that isolation just became too much and overwhelmed him. And it's just so heartbreaking to see, and just watching the video of his dad tell the story, and I'll link it here in our show notes. It was just heartbreaking, and knowing some of the family, it broke my heart a little bit more, but just to see that and to listen to this conversation again with Attaboy and just that need in our schools for God, for Christ, for that hope, and to just break down those barriers of isolation, it just became very, very real. Combining that story with what Attaboy is doing, just the power that there is in what they're doing, and just the mission field that our schools still are. So it's an awesome conversation with Attaboy, and I'm excited to have you hear it. And without further ado, here it is. We are starting off We Love Christian Music Awards episode series here, and we are starting it off with Attaboy. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves so we get your voice and so we know who's talking when.
My name is Ryan. I'm from Pennsylvania, and I've been with Attaboy now for about 6 years.
Yep, I am Jeff. I'm the lone original in the band, so that's a nice way of saying I'm the old guy.
This is Melanie, and I'm originally from Indiana, and I've been in the band for almost 6 years now.
And I'm Christian, and I'm originally from North Carolina. I've been in the band for almost 7 years.
So before we get started kind of down your way, Attaboy, where did the name come from?
Attaboy is just a term of encouragement, and it's fun, which are things that we want to be about as a band, but we don't really have like a great story of how we came up with the name. So we just tell people if they come up with a great story, please let us know, because we probably would rather steal that.
Yeah, I'm just imagining somebody's mom just being, "Hey, Attaboy, Attaboy, Jeff, keep going."
Yeah.
We'll stick with that one. There's your story.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
So tell us a little bit about what Attaboy is and kind of what your heart behind the music is.
You can't see it on a podcast, but that's us pointing to each other to see who's going to talk. So Attaboy, like we said, has been a band for about 15 years. And the first 9 years or so of that was a lot of what we would call in-house ministry. We did a lot of church concerts, youth concerts, camps, retreats, etc. All really valuable ministry. But about 6 years ago, we decided that it was just time to get outside the four walls of the church. And so we actually partnered with a nonprofit called Stand for Truth. And through them, our mission really totally changed. So now our mission is to go into public high schools and middle schools and reach unchurched students with the gospel. So we do that by, we crafted a 1 hour school assembly that's kind of character based. We do, treat people with respect, do the right thing, that kind of a message. But then through that, we're able to invite them back to an evening concert where we get to do our real concert and really just have a blast doing that with original music. And at that concert, we also get to share the gospel very clearly with students that often would never set foot normally in a church.
Talk a little bit about that line, because obviously in our culture now with the schools, we can't really talk about that. It's an instant ejection from the church. Just don't leave. Security escorts you out. It's a bad situation.
Yeah.
So what's kind of that line when you're doing that school assembly to invite that presence, but not?
We've used the word, we're very strategic in how we go about making the transition from the school assembly into the evening concert. So we market ourselves currently as a motivational speaker band. Schools have budgets for character-based education that they bring in speakers, anti-bullying, anti-drugs. We fit in that category as far as the school show goes. So that's all we market to the school. And that assembly has no overt religious content. There's nothing that would cross a line legally as far as content goes. But then through that, once we've booked that assembly, we'll then come in and just say, hey, we're on tour, we're going to do this concert in your town, and it so happens that your school is the perfect place to hold it. Can we use your building? So then it becomes a separate event. It's not school sponsored. It's after hours. It's an optional event for students to be at. So that's where we find the freedom to go into the more direct, overt spiritual content without crossing any lines, giving principals a total out so that hey, we didn't sponsor this. They just asked to use the building. Generally, that's a rule that anybody can come in and use a school building after school hours if it's available. So that's kind of how we keep that separate, but also strategic, and working really hard to not cross lines and also be able to still do this mission that we're on.
As you're talking with some of the high school, middle school students after the shows, what's the most prevalent theme as you're talking with these kids?
I would say one thing is there's just like a lot of isolation and loneliness. I mean, one thing we've just really seen is like students they just want to be like heard. They just want to know that somebody cares. A lot of them have little to no home situation, or maybe a really bad home situation, or just overlooked by their peers. We talk to tons of students that we'll get in a conversation and we just realize like they just need to talk to somebody. They just need to be heard. And even reflected in that is one of the songs off of our latest album, Wild, called Disappearing, is about that. It's about just feeling that loneliness, and we use that strategically in our show to kind of connect with them and then use that to turn the corner and try to offer the hope of a relationship with Christ. But yeah, I think that loneliness and isolation is a big theme that we see.
It's been a little while since I've been in school, in high school and middle school, and it's getting farther and farther as years go past. But, with the bullying, a lot of times we have now the no tolerance policies. It almost seems like you're almost punished for coming out reporting bullying. Do you guys see a lot of that as you guys are going through the schools?
I think personally what I feel like I've heard a little more now is that kids are actually getting burnt out on hearing about bullying. Like that word. So we actually kind of address the way we treat people in our assembly, but we don't actually use the word bullying. And so I think in that way, it's kind of a unique approach to talking about, hey, let's treat people in a way that's respectful, in a way that's kind, without just coming down and say, don't bully people. And at the same time, I think there is a realm where we do find kids that have asked us about it. What do you do if somebody's bullying you? And they're in a tough spot because you can get picked on for reporting it, because if you're a snitch, there's that. But at the same time, they shouldn't be going through that, and they shouldn't be doing it by themselves. So we always try to encourage them to pull in trusted adults and tell them that they have adults around them that do care about them. And we tell them that it's not okay that they're being mistreated. And we also try to encourage them at least a little bit to look at the idea that the people that are hurting them have often been hurt themselves. And so maybe there's a way to look with a little more compassion than just simply this person's a bad person. That maybe they need help too.
And Melanie, from the girls' side, obviously there's more physical bullying from the guys' side. What common themes do you see from the girls' side in the bullying?
I mean, honestly, there's a lot of the same stuff there, but there's also a lot of a lot of cyberbullying, a lot of comparison. That's stuff that I saw when I was in high school and middle school, and it's stuff that is even worse nowadays because our generation growing up, we had the option of when we left school, we were able to leave that behind. Where now with social media, with phones, they don't have a way to get away from that. And so they always have that at their fingertips. If somebody has their phone number, they can't get away from that. And even if they don't even have social media, they know that people are still talking about them, that people can talk behind their backs. Knowing that there are people who love them and support them and want to be there for them is just really helpful. So we encourage people to reach out. At our shows afterwards, we take time to hang out with students, and we really encourage them to reach out to us on Instagram, on social media, email, whatever way they want to, or just talk to us after the show and tell us their story, whatever they're going through. And we receive so many messages from people that, we've had people literally say that night they were planning on committing suicide and they decided not to, and they came to our show instead. We just encourage them to just keep going. And a lot of these students are just so broken. We just continue to encourage them, and we just give them resources and suicide hotlines, and we just tell them, we try to plug them in with local churches and say, hey, here's people in your community. Like, we can help you a little bit, but we keep traveling and we're not local. So here's people in your community who care about you and want to help you. And that's really, really important, to have a local community of people who can support you in whatever you're doing.
So what support do you guys get from local churches as you guys are going through? Do you reach out to churches as you're in the city and try and partner with them?
Yeah, that's a huge part of our ministry, actually, because like Melanie was saying, we realize we're just there for that one night. We love the ability to correspond with students online, but even with that, we just can't be the go-to source for follow-up for them with, the amount of people we're performing for throughout a year. And so that's just such a huge ingredient. So every time we line up an outreach concert, our immediate next step is to try to reach out to as many churches as possible in the area to invite them to partner with us that night. And we want to introduce them, to give students a face to the name and show students that not only are there adults in this community that care for you and can answer your questions and help you in whatever ways, but to hopefully show students where they can get plugged in as well if they're interested in exploring faith more. So yeah, that's a huge part of our ministry, and it's just really cool too to be able to just have kind of that instant bond and camaraderie. We've never met these people from the churches, and yet because we're all on the same mission, just to walk into a town and feel that kind of support has been really amazing.
How much support do you normally get from churches? Do you have like a huge outpouring, or does it just kind of depend on the city? Or
the uniqueness of the way we do the ministry that we've done is some other, maybe what you call kind of a traditional Christian model of doing, is a lot of churches in an area will come together and bring in an actor, a speaker, to go to like all the schools in the area, and then on Friday night they'll do an event, like a really big event, invite everybody to it. And you can get a really big event doing that, and maybe you go to like 15 schools in a week, and then you do your Friday night event. It's a really big event. What we've found is that by marketing ourselves directly to the school and then producing the evening concert ourselves, we actually, in doing the assembly during the day and then doing the event right there that night, the event technically is smaller than what that Friday event would have been, but the ratio of students that would come back actually is probably greater. So it's a smaller show, but more students are coming over the course of that week to the show. So we go in with the intent that we're going to do the ministry no matter what happens, no matter who's there. And then we bring in the churches once it's all produced. So actually a church that's willing to partner with us has to do so little that like sometimes they're like, this seems too good to be true, because they're like, wait, we don't have to do, you're going to set everything up. You're going to do all the work. You're going to do this outreach. You've already got it booked and we don't have to pay for it. What's going on? What's the catch? So it's really exciting to see churches that will latch onto that and be like, yes, we want to be a part of what you're doing. And then we'll bring them on stage. We introduce them to the students. We try to connect with them. And so we've seen really cool support. Most of the time, once we've got a church that understands what we're doing, they're really gung-ho about what we're doing. But then a step forward or further with how churches have shown a really cool outpouring is, as a band, we have actually started raising support as missionaries to do what we do. So we'll get an honorarium from the school, but that doesn't cover all of the costs. And so in raising support, some of the churches that partner with us, sometimes they'll have us come to their church on a Sunday morning and let us talk about the mission that we're on and just invite them to consider supporting us as missionaries in our own country. And so that outpouring has actually truly been what has allowed us to keep going with what we're doing and make this a viable living option right here in our own country to take the gospel to these students, because churches are willing to jump on board with that.
I think as a church, when we hear the word mission, we're thinking of Africa or something like that. And that's automatically where our money goes to, and that's kind of where our focus is. And I think there's, just like what you're saying, there's a huge opportunity here in this country as well.
Yeah.
Whether it be inner city, whether it be schools. I mean, even the richer neighborhoods where that isolation comes in, there's still a huge mission field here within the borders of our country.
Yeah, something we share with people is that 8 out of 10 students in America don't go to church, but 9 out of 10 of those students do go to public schools. So that alone shows you the incredible mission field that is America's public schools.
That's my kid. That's the one that's not. So thanks for pointing that out for me. Now I'm the weirdo. Great. So Jeff is a resident old guy of the group. What have you seen? Yeah, everybody's like, yes. No, okay. What have you seen change over the years? What have you kind of seen how everything's grown or changed or whatnot over the years that you've been a part of Attaboy?
Sure, yeah. So the two quick things that jump out are, one, just musical styles. That's been an interesting thing for us as a band to navigate, especially, again, because of course, we love making music and creating, and that's cool. But really, at the end of the day, like, it's all about the ability to share gospel with students, and musical just becomes a tool to do that. So that's been interesting just to see, when we first started out, it's a lot of more bands and, like your Reliant K kind of stuff and like pop punk, and that's very much what we were doing. But now in 2020, there's not a lot of bands like that are doing things on the same level that they were back then. So yeah, just to try to adapt and stay current and still continue to produce music that is something that students will connect with. It's been a fun challenge, but definitely a challenge. The other big thing that just jumps out at me is honestly just how social media has played a role in obviously our culture, but specifically in the lives of students. I think we've talked about the kind of things that people deal with, the issues that people struggle with. There's maybe not necessarily new issues, but they're manifested in new ways. And social media just absolutely amplifies and magnifies some of those issues in ways that we haven't seen before. So that's been a really interesting thing just to observe as we're in schools and seeing how that sort of thing is impacting students.
So you're talking about the change of musical styles and all that. What would you call what you're doing right now? Where have you landed at this point? Everybody's fighting for the microphone on this one.
No. We definitely run a spectrum of influences, like personally, which is kind of fun to come together and because we all collaborate on the writing process and everything as well. But what we kind of landed on for the latest album, or maybe the past two albums, is like indie pop, like kind of a fun indie pop. I think something that has always been in the DNA of Attaboy is just the word fun, whether it be our live performances or the recorded music or whatever. We just know that that's a great connecting point for a lot of people and something that is sometimes missing in a lot of pop music as well. So yeah, I think fun indie pop or maybe some pop rock covers a lot of the ground.
I guess that covers it.
Oh, yeah, we all agree on that. We all agree on that.
So you guys as a band agree very well. I love it.
Yeah.
So what is your guys' favorite song from this latest album? What kind of poured out the tough questions?
That's like asking somebody, hey, who's your favorite child?
Well, I can already tell. Let me ask a different question. What was the song that you guys started writing but kind of took a different direction on you? What song kind of took you guys by surprise?
I think, personally, this song, I called it like my dark horse favorite. Like I didn't expect it to be what it became, but it's a song called Giving Up the Fight. And lyrically and musically, it just came together in a way that when we were done, I was like, oh man. Like writing the words felt substantive, but then combined with the music, it was like, oh, this has more depth than I even thought it had. That's a weird way to put that, but like we've used that song in our evening concert as kind of the follow-up to the gospel. And it's a song about forgiveness and coming to freedom by giving up the fight and by surrendering, which sounds like an utter irony. That one to me was one of the songs that stuck out as I didn't expect this to be one of my favorite songs, but it really is one of my favorite songs on the album.
One other one I would mention, it's a song called Never Going Back. And, we wrote it and clearly believed in it enough to put it on the album. But what was really cool was kind of at the 11th hour, we worked with a guy named Doug Weir. He produced the album. He, before we started tracking anything, suggested, hey, what if we, just tweak like the verse melody to do a little more like this? And I think for me personally, and maybe everybody, just what he suggested really just took it to another level. Mm-hmm. And for me personally, that was a song that went from being just kind of middle of the pack, and I liked it, but just not my favorite. And then it really lifted into a new ballpark. So that was just fun. I mean, We never want to bank on that kind of magic happening in the studio. We want to be as prepared as possible just in case it doesn't happen. But when it does, it's really cool and just fun to look back to see how in the moment some crazy inspiration or idea can just take off and turn into awesome things. So
I look back on that moment and I'm like, thank God he suggested that change, because when I think back on what we had, I was like, I mean, it was fine, but it was not like what he changed it. And to me, I'm like, oh, thank God we got that switched.
I mean, he just did what a good producer does, which is see the vision of the intention of the song. Yeah. And we were also ingrained in what we were doing with the writing process. He was able to say, oh, if you want to go that direction, here's how to really take it that direction. So we were all really excited when that all came to be. Yes. But
I think one other song that I think the whole band would agree is probably one of our favorites. It's a song called Fire. And it's, as far as fun goes, like it's one of the most fun songs, I think, on the record. And then I think an additional question is like, what is the most, like maybe what song we like the most live, because we kind of change all of them to do them live. Some of them went from being like fun to like really fun live. So we've had a blast doing this record live. Yeah.
Well, we are all excited to see you guys perform here at the We Love, actually it's called the Together We Love event. I'll get it right one of these days. But we're excited to see you guys perform live. And if you're listening to this after the fact, find it on our YouTube channel. It'll be there. And we're really excited, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Too, yeah.
Thank you.